Hi, my name is Laura Chapman and I run and own Chapmans, a property lettings and management company, and I'm a founder member of the Edinburgh Forum. And in here today chatting with Alex. Hi Alex, tell us more about
Hi. Lovely to see you. I'm Alex Richards. I work for Stevenson Insurance Brokers, and I also sit with Laura on the Edinburgh Care Forum. And we just thought it would be a nice opportunity just to introduce our audience to the Edinburgh Care Forum, a little bit about what we're about, and why there is a letting agent and why there is an insurance broker that sit within the forum. So if Laura, why don't you explain a little bit about what the Care Forum is and what it's there to do for our audience, and then we can bounce into each other's businesses.
Yeah, perfect. So the Edinburgh Care Forum was set up about, 10, 12 years ago. And it's really a group of like-minded professionals who are all either run their own business or expert within their businesses and fields. And we all come together once a month to provide information to each other, share best practice, give hints and tips on really how to offer a joined-up approach to anybody who is thinking about or looking at either going into care, who's needing care in the home, thinking of going into residential care, could be any age bracket, from young to old, and we all do our own things in our own respective businesses, but we often come together and collaborate and talk to each other and share stories saying, I've got a client who's in this situation, what should I do? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an insurance broker, I'm not a care home provider, but I also know what my client needs or what they might need. And so it's a great place for us to come together to help each other and therefore ultimately help our clients.
It's sort of like a hub of expertise, really, isn't it? We're sort of, when you're starting the process of a relative or a friend going into care, as you say, at whatever age that might be, it throws up all sorts of questions and how do I do this and when do I need to do that? And a lot of it can be in the financial services sector area, whereas others can be in a more practical professional area, such as yourself, Laura, with the letting of a property side of things. So it's trying to give ultimately our clients or our audience a hub of expertise, so that once they've dealt with one area of a question, that will probably kick into another, and it's so you've got a one-stop shop place to visit, if you like. And if we can't help you, then hopefully we can put you in touch with somebody that will be able to help you. So I think to kick off, we might say, well, why would if I'm going into care or a relative's going into care, why might I need the help of Chapmans, of a letting agent? Why might that be a worthwhile thing to do, apart from the obvious of somebody moving out? But do you want to expand a little bit on why some of your clients have come to you when they're going into care or relatives going into care, and why they've maybe approached you as a letting agent to help them?
Absolutely. So I'm kind of thinking of maybe sort of two completely different instances where we've helped with that. The first one, as anybody who knows me, was my very first client, who was a lady who was going into assisted living accommodation, and she'd lived in her home for 30 years, lots of memories, but she wanted to retain that property for one of her sons to actually inherit in a number of years' time, sort of 10 years hence. He had a property that came with his job, and he had no prospects of buying a home, and she wanted him to have it. So she asked us to help. So we rented out the property, which meant that it generated income for her, which helped subsidize her care costs. But it also, as we know, properties need to be lived in. They need to be heated. They need to be ventilated. They do need to be looked after. And so by using us, we were able to get tenants in who also, it was a lovely family home, and they looked after the property. We obviously oversaw that, and it also just brought in rent. So the property actually was looked after, it was enhanced because we made improvements, and it maintained its capital value as well. The capital value went up. So it all worked really, really well. And in fact, that client was with me for 7-8 years. And after she passed away, we continued managing it for her son until they decided what they were going to do with it. There was 2 boys involved, but it just meant that it bought them time, and there was lots of other reasons for doing it. But I also had another client who came to us who, really sad story, actually. He was in his early 40s and had been diagnosed with motor neurone disease. So he was actually referred to us by an existing client. And his flat was a third floor property with no lift, and he couldn't get up and down those stairs. So the rationale for him renting out his home was he actually went on to rent a ground floor, much bigger apartment that would accommodate his future care needs. So big wide doors, there'd be space for wheelchairs, winches to get in and out of bed and these sorts of things. But he wanted to preserve his flat, his family home, actually, for his partner. And we didn't know how long that journey was going to take. But what happened was we were able to rent out that property, generate income for him, which helped subsidise his much bigger flat costs. But when and it just kind of gave him peace of mind, but it meant that his partner knew that he could go back to his home at some point in the future, and it was really, just was a very distressing journey. But by renting out the home, we brought in income, we looked after the property, and actually, when my client sadly passed away, we continued renting that property out for over a year, which gave his partner time to decide what he really wanted to do. And actually, in the end, he was dead set. He wanted to move back into it at the start of the journey. But at the end, he went, do you know what? My life's moved on. I've changed irrevocably. I want to take a different course. And we actually helped them sell that property with the tenants still living in it. So those tenants, actually, it was lovely. They went on to have a baby in the property. And it was, I don't know, it always gives me goosebumps, but it kind of felt like a, continuity of life somehow.
And I think there are a couple of things to draw from those experiences are at a time, emotional. It's a very emotional time. There's a lot of emotions involved, and trying to make those decisions on your own, or even do, a lot of people let properties themselves, don't they? But trying to do that yourself when you're going through such a time of it, having someone like Chapman's just take care of all of that for you. All the legalities, everything that, obviously, all the legislation that has to be complied with in order to successfully let out a property. And it just takes all the aggravation away at a time, so they can really focus on the health and the matter at hand, and focus on themselves and what they need to do. And I think the other spin-off from that was, as you said, you're generating a rental income to help pay for care fees and so on. And that in itself then spins off to other aspects of our hub, to the Penny and her team looking after, your finances, and you've got Leanne and her team at Gillespie McAndrew helping deal with any kind of legal issues that may arise, and the accountancy side of things. So these are all professional services within the Edinburgh Care Forum that we can help with, which, as I say, that example in itself just could have spun off a few other questions.
Well, actually, if I hadn't been involved in the Care Forum for so long, I wouldn't have been aware of things like power of attorneys, and so because he had a power of attorney in place, it meant that I can take instructions from his partner and brother, actually, because they were both powers of attorney, but everything was well set up. But having that knowledge and understanding of some of these things, I couldn't put in a power of attorney in place. I wouldn't ever, seek to advise, but it was because I was able to have that conversation, because I had that awareness of these what things were and how useful they could be. It just helped with having that conversation, but also knowing that actually I'm okay to manage this and take instructions from this person and these sorts of things. So it was incredibly powerful. And obviously, the other sort of involvements from the forum would be obviously yourself, Alex. Your team are fantastic in providing the insurance. So in terms of that, obviously, do you want to expand on that?
So I mean, when you're dealing with in circumstances with Chapmans where it's hopefully letting out properties for clients that have gone into care, we have a facility. We have a big property department that deals specifically with landlords who are renting out properties, and so you have a specialist residential property owners policy, and again, I think by using a broker, you're dealing with a person, and somebody who is obliged also to make sure that you're taken care of because it's in a vulnerable position. Whereas if you try to arrange that yourself on the computer, it's again just an aggravation. Am I choosing the right policy? Is it going to be fit for purposes? Have I disclosed everything I need to? Do I want accidental damage cover or not? You know, rather than you trying to be an insurance expert yourself, speak to somebody who is an insurance expert who can guide you through the process and provide you with what we know is a very good, wide covering policy that's obviously been stress tested in the markets that we use. I myself actually work specifically more with private clients, but that's not to say that the two don't overlap. They often do, and many of our clients and private clients are more elderly, and they themselves, you know, one of them may have gone into care more recently, and the one who's left at home may not be familiar with a lot of the financial aspects of dealing with the household, and need an in-person visit, or certainly somebody who can just take their time with them over the telephone and explain how the insurance works, what it's there to do, if in fact there is insurance in place. We've had a number of situations where they can't find the insurance policy, and of course your home is often your most valuable asset, so you want to make sure it's properly protected. So I think the key thing with so many of these is to speak to a professional in that set. It won't cost you that much more. Of course, you know, we earn commission on our policies, just like the online markets do as well. But we have an in-house claims department, and I think so. What that means is that when it comes to a claim, we have somebody who's working hard on your behalf to deal with the insurer, rather than you having that conversation with the insurer. And along with that, and any changes you might need to make throughout the policy period, or anything else really, or just advice around valuations and things like that, you can speak to somebody. You know, you can have that open conversation, and you know, anything that might throw up allows you to work through it and make sure the policy is going to react to you accordingly or be adapted accordingly. So I think that's really the key thing to take away. Obviously, the insurance is important, but it's being able to make sure that we are able to capture your demands and needs, your risk appetite, what your circumstances are, and go on a journey. As you say, you mentioned it earlier, go on a journey with the client and make sure that they are taken care of. And I think that's what, you know, the Edinburgh Care Forum, it's to provide care for our clients who need us.
Yeah. And I think that's what you were saying there, though, is you know, having a conversation, maybe a property visit, but it's having that conversation, because you don't know what you don't know. You know, I mean, we all are busy in our day jobs. Everybody, you know, whether it's raising a family, whether it's going out to work, working from home, you know, whatever it is that we're doing. But until you have a conversation and have someone who's highly skilled and highly knowledgeable in their sector asking you questions, then there are things that you won't have thought of, you know, in terms of, you know, have you actually got insurance? Well, what happens if, you know, what happens if someone has gone into care, but it's respite, so they're going to come back after 2 months, but you know, what happens there? And until you have that conversation and develop a relationship, because I think, again, that's probably a key differential in what everybody in the forum is about. We grow our businesses through relationships. It's not just a transaction. Until you have those conversations, which can kind of go in any direction, then you don't know what you don't know. I mean, have you had any kind of experiences like that when you've gone out? Yeah,
a common one, fairly common, that happens is your eyes. You know, you find someone approaches you. They want you to put your eyes, if you like, on their policy to check through things, and you know, we get a fairly good feel for what it would cost to reinstate a property in Edinburgh, for example. And you see a figure for a rebuild cost. So when you're talking about insurance and you're insuring the buildings of a property, what you're insuring is how much it would cost to rebuild it if it burnt down, worst case scenario, not what the market value is. And quite often you see a figure and you think, oh, that looks really low to reinstate a property. And they say, oh, yeah, no, we just, you know, that was just a figure that we sold it for, you know, or it was sold to us for the property. And, so they've been insuring for all those years at the market value, which is very different to what it would cost to reinstate the property. So that's a sort of fairly common thing that we can come across, and that can have all sorts of implications, because then what happens is someone needs to make a claim, and then they're furious with the insurance company because they're not going to pay them what it's going to cost to rebuild it, because they've been insuring for the incorrect amount. So as a broker, our job is to make sure we go through that and explain that clearly to the client. If necessary, arrange for a reinstatement valuation. Obviously, we're not surveyors, so we can't advise on what they need to be insuring their buildings for. That needs to be done by a qualified building surveyor. But we can help put them in the direction of where they can get the help to get that done, or whether it can just be a desktop valuation, for example, so you don't need someone in person there to do it. So that's a typical scenario. And others can be, again, to do with valuations with contents and valuables and art and antiques. But those can be very personal conversations. And again, that's why using a broker is nice, I think, because those discussions, when you're talking about somebody's contents, it's very personal, it's their personal things. So again, that forming that relationship with somebody that you trust, that the information obviously will always remain confidential, but it allows you that greater depth of understanding of the client's lifestyle, for example. So this is just going back to valuations in the buildings. That's the most common one that you come across, and especially at the moment with, even if the rebuild figure, it is a rebuild figure, but it may not have been evaluated for some years. With everything that's going on at the moment, we're in just started March 2022, haven't we? So building costs are going through the roof with inflation and everything else. So it really is a time to make sure that your rebuild valuations on your properties are correct.
Yeah, how quickly do they the market reflect that? Because obviously in terms of lettings, we've seen a lot of our costs go up in terms of new boilers, refurbs, bathrooms, and also just supply chain issues, legacy of COVID. But yeah.
So insurers will always what they call index link buildings and general contents year on year. So they apply a percentage uplift, which is why there's always that gripe, my insurance premium has gone up. Well, it's always going to go up a little bit because of this index linking, which allows for inflation. And of course, historically, not historically, but it's certainly over the last 5 years or so, that's been at around sort of 3% for buildings and contents. Now we're seeing easily 6% applied to those areas of buildings and contents. So there is a sort of an automatic buffer, a buffer built in. But even then, it's still worth checking every 5 years or so that even though the property has been index linked, it's still worth doing an exercise, I would suggest, to make sure that the rebuild figure remains correct.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's funny how in terms of the forum, is this, a lot of this information is not just useful for somebody, going into care or who has care needs. It's just really useful everyday bits of information, whether it's insuring a rented property or insuring your own home. So that's one of the things I love about our monthly meetings, because we hear so many stories, which are all really useful, and they all just go in there. You never know when you're going to pluck them out and go, I've got a client in this situation, I need to speak to Alex because of this. And I think that's one of the really lovely things about the forum.
And I think one of the other areas that we sort of slightly touched on earlier that is relevant for our two businesses is unoccupied. So sometimes a client may sadly pass away and there isn't a desire to rent the property. The idea is to put the property straight on the market and get the capital out of it. And I know that Chapmans do offer, within a certain geographical area, probably in and around Edinburgh, a sort of unoccupied property inspection service. Is that correct? Just to make sure that property, we touched on a property needing to be lived in to make sure that plumbing and so on is working correctly. But equally, when it's unoccupied, it needs to be checked to make sure that there aren't any leaks and things going on. But that, I think, is a service that you offer. Is that correct?
No, absolutely. Yes, we offer that void management service. And yes, and as you said, a lot of the time, to be honest, a client will decide, actually, we need to sell this property, or they just want to defer a decision, so they leave it empty. And sometimes property also is perhaps maybe not modernized enough for today's quite discerning tenant. So yes, in terms of we offer a void management service where we will go in on a fortnightly basis, but more if that's stipulated in the insurance policy. So again, I would need to say to them, well, what does your policy actually need us to do? As a bare minimum, we would do things like, check the windows, check for water ingress, check for any signs of damp, infestations, etc.
Even collecting post, isn't it? That's an obvious one,
Exactly,
which can gather at the door as a sure sign that somebody's not there, which
Exactly, picking that up, returning to sender or forwarding on. These are all the things that we can do. But if there's additional things that the insurance require us to do, as long as we're physically able to do it, we don't physically check roads and these sorts of things ourselves on a big, tenement building. But again, those are sorts of things that we could help with. Again,
and I think, and that just leads on to me saying that for all of you out there who may have a situation where you find yourselves in the hands of an unoccupied property, you must let your insurers know, because the chances are they may give you some grace period, but then after a while they'll say that they don't wish to insure the property anymore because it doesn't fall within their risk appetite. So there's specialist insurers out there that we have access to, that will arrange insurance or happy to provide insurance for properties that are unoccupied. It's important. It's one of those things that could probably get easily missed in the emotions of the circumstances. And again, worst case scenario is that, there is a horrific, or there's a leak. Any leak is bad if it's left unattended for any for hours, let alone days. And you want your policy to react, and you then discover that you haven't told the insurers that the property is unoccupied, and then you discover that you've got no cover to help you with your leak claim. Yes, do let your insurers know if you are vacate, or if a property has become vacant and is not going to have anybody living in it, and then a special product can be provided, and then we have products that will insure it for 3, 6, 9 or 12 months. You don't have to take out a 12-month policy if that's not what you think is needed. There is flexibility available around that, which is useful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's just like everything, it's just kind of good to know these things that you should be thinking about, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Brilliant.
Well, I think that's been a rather productive morning.
I think so. And I've had my coffee, which I should be supposed to be giving it up for March, but anyway.
Well, hopefully there were some helpful tips and pointers there for our audience this morning.
Well, look, have a great day, Alex, and we'll catch up at our next meeting, which will be a face-to-face one, which will be fantastic.
It will be. First time in a long time. So looking forward to seeing all the rest of the Care Forum there. And in the meantime, thanks very much, everybody, and we hope to see you again soon.
Brilliant. Bye-bye.
Bye.